Story 1. So this started during the spring break last year when I did some Gundam customs for extra money while mowing people's lawns and washing some cars here and there. How the city is laid out. My house is all there was on the upper northwest side of the city I live in. This is down in Houston, and the only bit of city in at least 100 to 190 miles from any other city like Dallas, so I had my prices at a firm price so I can pay for gas and for my Gunpla. Gunpla stands for Gundam Plastic Model, and they are just small model kits of Gunpla from their respective shows. But anyways, back to the story. I enter the Target he usually go to look at their Gunpla stock and see what he could buy. And like usual, they had some high-grade kits from the range from HG Car's Red Zaku Azeon Mobile Suit, but mainly used as a grunt. A couple of Battle Log Gunpla kits like the Barbatoris, a Tanjiro statue kit, Deku statue kit, a Ultra Instinct Goku model kit, and a Naruto model kit. I go to grab the high-grade Strike Freedom Gundam, the last one BTW for an ancient Egyptian type of custom. It was a Horus style of custom, and I had to heavily modify the head. I go to the self-checkout lines so I can buy it, and I feel something tugging at my shirt, and I turn around as I see this 5'4", probably middle-age or 40-year-old woman who is surprisingly fit for her age, and this convo happens. "What is this that you have, if you don't mind me asking?" "I don't mind, and it's a model kit for a custom I am doing for a client." "Oh, is it like Legos?" "Yes it is, but it's from Japan." I then started laughing as some of the other guys that were around me heard it and also chuckled, and this somewhat irritated her. "Oh, it's one of those people that started COVID. Those people ruined our lives forever, and they are the ones to blame. Go put that back and go get something real." I didn't budge because I am a 6'0" inches man, and I am not frail, and I was in swimming as a sport and had since quit because of personal issues. I was next in line for the self-checkout, and she grabbed me and forced me into a citizen's arrest, and I just went along with it because I could feel an anxiety attack come up. My anxiety, like others, are vastly different. My hands start shaking. I start stuttering, some slight sweating, and mine starts racing, so I sit down next to the small little refrigerators, and one of the guys who chuckled decided to stay and sit with me because he has a stepson with anxiety, while the lady called the cops, and we all waited. When the cops got there, they asked for her side first, while what seems to be a newbie pulled out his cuffs and was ready to arrest me until the guy who stayed told him mine and his side of the story, and the two cops switched roles as the female cop insisted on arresting me anyways. But thank God that the older female cop said to switch places, and the man explained what happened since I was getting dangerously close to my anxiety attack, and she asked for my name and what I was doing, and I told her and showed her the kit. And the man also mentioned that I have anxiety and wasn't able to answer most of the questions being asked, and she automatically knew and told the newbie. I will call the older female cop Queen because she looked like a combination of Queen Bee from RID 2015 and Bumblebee from Young Justice. Invasion. Queen tells the lady I did nothing wrong and was fined for wasting the officer's time and to please leave the property. She of course got angry and slapped Queen on the face, as she was also charged with assaulting an officer, and was arrested, and Queen tells the newbie to take her to the cruiser outside, and she does so. Queen then asks what is my favorite soda, and I say it's MTN Dew, and she offers to buy both for me, and I cry and smile because it was a very kind thing to do, especially from a cop, and she hugged me and I was happy for it, and then I simply went back home. Story 2. I dealt with my manipulative, abusive aunt all my life and finally got revenge. Players: myself late 30s, sister 3 years younger, aunt older sister to my mother, mother single mom, adopted, no blood relation to my aunt. Cousins 3 total, 1 male, 2 females. I have good relationships with them now, mostly. My estranged father, who had been living several counties over, was pretty much out of the picture by the time my parents got their divorce when I was 9. Due to financial hardship, we were forced to live with my aunt and the nightmare household we would soon find ourselves in. My aunt married into Georgia wealth, and you can figure out what that means on your own. She had 3 kids and eventually caught her husband having an affair. It's a huge scandal. She gets the house, the kids, and a fat payout from the family attorney. This is important because my aunt didn't do a thing in her life to earn her money, her house, her lifestyle, or basically anything. She was born poor, along with my mom. In her household, she was drunk with power. Years of therapy have allowed me to recognize that certain people, when in a position of power, get a perverse pleasure in ordering others to do their bidding. She was the strictest of authoritarians in every possible way you could imagine. Chores had to be completed by a specific time. Vacuuming by 3:45 p.m., dishes by 3:55 p.m., and laundry days for my mother and us kids were Tuesdays 5:35 p.m., 7:55 p.m. If it was still running, she would shut off the power to the 2 units. As we grew older, her own kids opted to stay with their father for full-time custody, and she had them on weekends. Even they couldn't stand her when she was in charge and in the house. As time passed, she got them less and less, opting for alternating weekends as high school activities took precedence over time with her mother. For my sister and me, the large 6-bedroom house was not ours for the taking. My mom had to pay rent for 1 bedroom as well, as that was all she could afford on her salary. We had to share a bedroom until my 2nd year of high school. All the while, there was 1 spare, unused bedroom available at all times. My aunt needed this for guests when they stayed over. Not 1 guest stayed there in the 10 years I was under that roof. Finally, the church we attended told my aunt to give up the spare bedroom so my sister could have her own room, as it was unhealthy for 2 teenagers to share a room like that. That infuriated my aunt because someone told her what to do in her own household. My sister and I got the brunt of her wrath. As my mom's salary was tapped out, my sister and I had to do extra chores like mowing the lawn, trimming the shrubs, and cleaning the pool, which we could no longer use without her being outside watching us. My aunt's behavior was becoming more and more outrageous and disconnected from society. For example, she had always snapped her fingers when she wanted to get someone's attention. But it was getting far more frequent, and she would blow up into a tirade if either my sister or I didn't obey. Her own kids tried repeatedly to tell her that what she was doing was wrong, but she wouldn't listen. Eventually, they wanted nothing to do with her outside of the home. She was a tyrant there, and repeated intervention to get her to see the folly of her ways would fall on deaf ears. I snapped. All through high school, I had no confidence as a person. I was weak-willed and growing ever more distant from friends and society. I say this in all truthfulness and fear. Had circumstances continued the way they had been going, I could very well have taken a gun to myself, or, worse, to others around me. I was that bad. I had just graduated high school and started my first semester of community college. I'm 2 weeks into my classes, attending from home, when my aunt drops a bomb on me. You owe me $$ for this month's rent, and the same amount for next month's rent as well. It is the 27th, after all. You're an adult now. You're out of high school and working now, so you need to pay rent. The heck? I blew a gasket as I yelled back. You can't just suddenly decide to charge me rent just because you feel like it. I need 30 days' notice. I have rights. My aunt yelled at me with some nonsense excuse that she had discussed this with my mother, and it was decided that I needed to pay my own rent now. In some miraculous backbone move, of which I still have no idea how I stood up to her, I yelled right back at her. If I'm an adult, then treat me like one and talk to me about rental agreements. I'll start paying you rent in 30 days, starting the 1st. I turned my back to her and walked away with my fists balled tight. I was furious with anger, but I walked away. My aunt saw my fists from behind and screamed bloody murder that I was going to attack her. No, I wasn't. She snapped her fingers at me repeatedly on my tail to get my attention, but I didn't turn around. I needed to cool off and clear my head. As I turned the corner, she grabbed my wrist hard, yelling, "I'm not finished talking to you." I threw my still balled-up fist forward, keeping with my stride, to break her grip, as I hadn't stopped my momentum. This caused her grabbing arm to slam hard into the corner of the wall that I had just turned into. She screamed in pain, but I left the house and took off. The aftermath of that incident was that my aunt called the cops on me in an attempt to press charges. She was taken to the hospital and suffered a fractured wrist, and she was put in a cast or sling. I don't know, as I never saw it and never inquired further. Her story changed every time she told the cops what happened, while my story was spot on every time. I can still recall that moment down to the smell in the house, where I was facing, the working and non-working light bulbs, etc. Forever ingrained in me. I was kicked out of the house, and I couldn't visit my sister or my mom there at the house again. Fine by me, as I didn't want to see my witch aunt ever again. I was happy to meet my mother and sister at the local diner or outlet. We could be ourselves there, not hostages in our own homes. Years later, my mom wised up, got out of that abusive relationship with her sister, and moved out on her own. She got a nice temporary place, invested wisely, and, with the help of the church, got help getting a place of her own. In 2009, after the housing crisis, she bought her own place, which she could never have afforded on her own prior to the market crash. But some good came out of it. She wept knowing my sister and her family and myself could come visit any time and stay. Over the years, I've been able to forgive my aunt. Not forget, forgive. I've let go of a lot of my anger and hatred towards her that she put me through. When she has no leverage or control over us, she's a somewhat decent person for being a total witch of a person. My cousins have calmed down, heard my side of what happened those years ago, and know what kind of person I am compared to what kind of person their mother is. They chose to believe me and know I didn't hit her, strike her, or beat her across the face like she continues to claim. The revenge. While I have been able to forgive my aunt for what she has done to me, I cannot forgive her for what she did to my mother. Kept her in financial hardship for a decade while she sat on a bank account full of cash and assets. Or what she did to my sister. Forced her to pay for damages because the water heater burst while my aunt and mother were away one weekend, leaving my sister at home. She didn't discover the flooded rooms for hours. My aunt's reasoning: it was her responsibility to watch the house. It is not the responsibility of the homeowner to maintain or replace the water heater before it goes. Let's leave that upfront $5,000 financial burden before the flood insurance kicks in on a 16-year-old girl. I've had little to no contact with my aunt since I was kicked out of the house nearly 2 decades ago. But I do keep in constant contact with my cousins. While I'm not going to divulge what I do for a living, I can say that I work with and for the government. I've worked so hard to get to where I am today. I'm known for being truthful, wise, and giving good advice when asked. Because of this, I often talk about finances with my cousins, all of whom are money smart and are doing well for themselves. They often relay this information to their scheming mother, who has no mind for business and investments. All that money she got from her house sale, her divorce settlement, and her previous investments is pretty much gone. I spent years planning the perfect trap, and it took a long time to prepare everything to make sure everything appeared right. I don't pretend to know the law, but I do know the regulations and laws pertaining to insider information. This is not that. I am 100% certain of it. And if I ever go to court, I know my lawyer has a solid case in my defense. But is this a gray area? Most definitely. I let slip to my cousins about some future real estate plans near my aunt's new area of living. It may be worth a lot more because of future development taking place in the area. All of that was true and backed up by what was in the newspaper and the new construction signs that had recently appeared on Google Maps at the time. The rest was fabricated by myself and backed up by actual information I looked up on real estate websites and on projects I was working on through my work. The telephone game takes place, and a few weeks later, I presume, my aunt starts making phone calls to real estate agents trying to buy lots of land in the undeveloped bad area of her new house. Over the course of a few months to half a year, she spends $300,000 of her last remaining savings on land, hoping it will pay out when the area around it gets developed in the upcoming years. Only HUD, the government, or the city have any plans to develop in those immediate areas. In fact, analysis showed that building in those areas was poor planning, and would cost the taxpayers 2 to 3 times as much as the land was not environmentally sound. It was best to build 6 miles away. This post was long overdue because it's been over 2 years since my aunt purchased land that is basically worthless. See, she won't sell the land unless she gets at least the same price she paid for it because she's the owner of that land. I can't tell her what to do on her own land. Sweet karma strikes in a way I couldn't possibly have foreseen. My cousin informed me that the value of the land has decreased significantly because it's not environmentally sound to build anything commercial there, but it's zoned for commercial use. Currently, 3 of the 4 blocks of land she purchased are just weed farms next to eyesore abandoned buildings or industrial complexes. Nobody can build on it, and neither does anyone want to buy it. It sucks to be her. The best part is that my cousins have absolutely no idea that I set them up for their mother to take the fall. These environmental results are relatively new and the perfect cover to explain why the project changed locations 6 miles away. Note: there seems to be some confusion as to my cousins being cheated out of their inheritance. Their father and his side of the family are still extremely wealthy, and each of my cousins is financially independent. Story 3. My story starts when I was just out running some errands when I stumbled upon a scene that left me shocked and eventually satisfied in the end. I was walking around after I was running some errands, browsing through the shops on Main Street, when I noticed a blind teen girl walking down the sidewalk with her cane in her hand and her glasses on her face. For a blind person, she seemed so confident, navigating her way gracefully despite her blindness. That's what actually forced me to notice her. But little did I know that a storm was brewing just around the corner. That's when I saw her, the ultimate Karen, strutting down the sidewalk with that infamous, "I want to speak to your manager" haircut. Karen was on a mission to ruin someone's day, and little did we know that the poor blind girl was about to become her unfortunate target. Karen, who was busy fumbling with her phone, collided with the girl and let out a dramatic gasp. "Watch where you're going, witch. You almost made me drop my phone." The poor blind girl immediately apologized, saying, "I'm sorry, ma'am. I can't see, and sometimes it's challenging to avoid accidents." But did that stop Karen from being unreasonable? Nope. Instead, she walked up to her and actually gave her a little shove. "Find yourself a corner to sit in and never walk aimlessly on the streets again," she sneered. My jaw dropped, along with those of the other people around. This woman was beyond entitled. She was downright cruel. The blind girl handled the situation with remarkable poise and said, "Ma'am, that was uncalled for. I have as much right to be here as anyone else." But Karen couldn't stand anyone challenging her authority. She turned back and slapped the girl across the face, knocking her glasses and cane away from her, causing her to stumble and fall. It was shocking and horrifying, and I couldn't believe my eyes. As the blind girl seemed to sob on the ground, Karen started screaming like a banshee, spewing all kinds of obscenities and nonsense. I swear, it was like watching a real-life villain in action. But just as I thought this nightmare would never end, karma stepped in. Among the passers-by, there was a man, tall and composed, with his 2 young daughters. He saw everything that happened and quickly sent his daughters to help the girl on the ground, while he approached Karen with a calm but stern demeanor. Then he revealed himself to be U.S. Marshal, and without hesitation, he put Karen in handcuffs while she continued her hysterics. "You're under arrest for assaulting this young girl," he said firmly. I couldn't believe it. It was my first time seeing the tables turn instantly like this. I gotta say, it's magical. While the marshal called for backup to take care of Karen, I went over to the poor girl to offer my support. She was still shaken and tearful, but seeing the kindness of strangers helping her regain her glasses and cane brought a small smile to her face. The man, who introduced himself as Marshal Dave, handled the whole situation with such professionalism and compassion. He stayed with us until another officer arrived, and Karen was taken away, still screaming and protesting her innocence. Throughout all this, the girl remained gracious, and I couldn't help but be impressed by her strength. We chatted a bit while waiting for the police report to be filed. She told me how she had been blind since birth, but had never let it hold her back. She had dreams of becoming a musician and was working hard on her music studies. As we talked, I felt privileged to meet such a strong young woman. Once the police had all the necessary information, the girl thanked the marshal and his lovely daughters for helping her out. She was so grateful for his intervention, as were the rest of us who witnessed the whole ordeal. The marshal was humble and kind, brushing off our praise as part of his job. He made sure the girl had someone to accompany her home safely and assured us that the legal process would take its course. Later, as I was curious and ended up following the case, the girl decided to press charges against Karen for the assault. And you know what else? She took it one step further and sued Karen for the physical and emotional damage she caused. I love it. I had the chance to catch up with her after she filed the charges, and she told me how she knew it wasn't just about seeking revenge. She wanted justice, not only for herself, but for others who might encounter entitled bullies like Karen. She teamed up with a good lawyer who specialized in cases involving discrimination and hate crimes. They gathered evidence, witness statements, and, of course, videos from some folks who filmed the whole fiasco. And let me tell you, the case didn't just end up being about the physical assault. Her lawyer argued that the attack was motivated by discrimination against disabled people, turning it into a hate crime case. And rightfully so. Nobody should have to endure such cruelty just because of their disability. The legal process took some time, as these things often do. But Karen was found guilty of felony assault with a hate crime enhancement. She was sentenced to 5 years in prison, and on top of that, she was ordered to pay restitution to the blind girl for the physical and emotional damage caused. So yeah, folks, next time you see a Karen brewing up trouble, remember this story and be the difference that you want to see. Story 4. This happened yesterday, and I am still super mad, so if there are spelling errors or grammar mistakes, it is because I'm typing with a lot of fury right now. My mother's younger brother's wife, entitled Aunt, has always been an annoying and entitled woman, so I try to limit my time with her. She expects people to drop things at a time to come help her because she's the wife of the only son. My mom is the oldest, most successful, and takes care of my grandparents, but they still favor my uncle more just because he is a boy. My uncle is, for all intents and purposes, a loser, gambles away his money and borrows money from my grandparents when they are just living on Social Security, and will likely never pay back the tens of thousands of dollars he owes my parents. They have one son, and he is the most spoiled brat I have ever met, despite the very little means to buy him anything. However, he has been taught his whole life that he does nothing wrong. If he gets in trouble at school, his parents tell him the other kid is wrong. Anyways, we decided to celebrate Chinese New Year early this year because it was a 3-day weekend the weekend before, and the NFCAF championships, so a lot of things to bring the family around. Anyways, I had just gotten a new home and decided to host the extravaganza. In my house, there's a den that I have dedicated to being my man cave/office. The room is on the bottom floor right next to the garage and laundry room. Anyways, this has always been one of my dream setups. The right is my workstation since I work from home at least once a week. The left is my personal game station. My gaming PC is mounted below the table, and then left of my computer is where my consoles are with a nice 40-inch 4K HDR TV. Anyways, I've worked hard creating this room and continue to work hard to get more stuff. So entitled Aunt and her hellspawn entitled cousin comes over. Since it was their first time over, I gave them a tour. Everything entitled Aunt sees, she has a negative comment about despite never having owned her own house because her husband is a deadbeat. When we reach my den, entitled cousin lights up and goes nuts over my setup. I tell them how I work on one side and play on the other side. My aunt goes straight into ridiculing me, how this is all a waste of money, and how I shouldn't be playing games. I remind her that I work in the gaming industry and that there's no age limit to video games. Entitled cousin starts whining about how he wants this too. Without a second thought, my aunt walks over to my gaming area and starts unplugging things and grabbing controllers. I ask her what the hell she is doing, and she says, "My son wants this, so I'm packing it up." I tell her that she cannot take what is not hers, and he cannot have it. Entitled cousin now starts screaming, "I want it. I want it now. Now I am a big guy for an Asian person. 5'10" inches and over 200 pounds of mostly muscle. My aunt is maybe 5'2" inches, so not only do I tower over her, I am probably twice her body weight, and she knows I am easily the strongest in the family, so there's no way she can wrestle anything away from me. I tell her to put everything back now. She reluctantly complies and haphazard puts stuff down. Might as well have dropped everything. She threatens to tell my mom, and I tell her to go ahead since my mom hates her. She drags entitled cousin out screaming, and I clean up my office and make sure to close the door behind me. The night goes on, and we're watching the games on TV while eating up a storm. I go to the bathroom and notice that both entitled aunt and entitled cousin are missing. It was odd because I could have sworn I heard more of that brat's crying earlier. That's when my spidey sense tingles, and I walk downstairs to see my entitled cousin carrying my PS4 and other stuff in his small arms. They're halfway in the garage when they turn around and see me. I scream out, "What the hell?" and they start running to their car. I chase after them and my scream alerts the entire family. I chase after them and get to their car before they do. I tell entitled aunt that she has some balls trying to steal from me. She smugly says that you can't steal from family and her son needs those games because he is such a good boy. I tell her she is not taking a thing and I will call the police on her. She thinks I'm bluffing, so I break out my phone and call my buddy, who is a cop, to see if he is free, and I explain the situation to him. At this point, my aunt is screaming up a storm. Neighbors are looking through the windows, and I am standing right between her and her car. My parents and my siblings all came out and blocked the car with me. Eventually, the police showed up, but not my friend. Someone else must have called. Entitled aunt goes into a weeping mode and tells the police how she's being robbed by these people. I try speaking, but she goes even louder. The cop's partner starts pushing me back and tells me to step away. I tell him that I'm not stealing anything she's trying to steal from me. The police are super confused, and even more police show up. Entitled aunt keeps preaching her nonsense. The cops appear to be taking her side. I try to talk, but no one is willing to listen. My friend eventually shows up and tells the other officers what is going on. They still don't believe me, but instead ask me if I can prove all of the items are mine. I take out my phone and show them on my Nest cams everything. I have a cam in my office because it also leads to the backyard, so if anyone comes in, it records everything. I show them the conversation of when entitled aunt first tries to take my stuff. Then I show them entitled aunt and cousin taking everything later and running out of the house. Entitled aunt starts backpedaling and says that all of this stuff belonged to her son. I know that entitled cousin doesn't know anything about console games, so I ask him what he plays on his PS4, and he immediately responds with Halo. Entitled aunt looks back at me smug, but as many gamers know, entitled cousin just done F'd up. I tell everyone how Halo is only an Xbox. You can't play it on PS4, and anyone who owned the console would know that. Finally, the police see the light and take back everything and hand my stuff back to me or my family. The police then ask if I want to press charges. I look at entitled aunt in the face and simply say yes. They arrested her, but I convince them to leave my entitled cousin with us instead. After about a week, I will drop the charges, but I want entitled aunt to sweat it out because she was not only theft, but it was considered grand larceny, and that was going to mean some serious jail time. She is now forever banned from my home. Story 5. So my background, I'm a 35 male. I've worked as a tech, a programmer, both freelance, then got into the culinary industry. Now I'm back in the tech world as a project manager. I cyber commute from my parents' store a few days out of the week as needed. Thanks for your sympathy. I'm yet again freelance in my work. During the pandemic, I lost my job and went back to school online. Got a bunch of certs and a degree, but this is key that it was all done online. Story starts a month prior. So I was working to form a new task force for a company, and thus I was to work with HR to pick out the best candidates for the team. We needed to hire a few new members. In this particular case, we needed an experienced project lead, so we have some guys in our second round and third round for interviews. As I'm going through their online portfolios with my team members, one guy who had been fast-tracked through the process was moved to the priority position. I start skimming through his various degrees and certifications. I'm pretty much smiling because someone else had decided to do the same thing I did during the pandemic. Same online school. Having a good feeling about him, I turn to his sample work. I download his files rather than just view them through the browser. I notice a chunk of his works have strange metadata. The files weren't exactly lining up with his school dates. No issue yet. Second issue. Some of his works are screenshots of papers saved as image files. My next step is to take his papers and run them through Google. I pick random parts of paragraphs and see if I get any results. Bingo! Each paper he wrote was plagiarized from someone else. I got to his research paper, which is profile highlighted. I read a few lines and wonder who he got this one from. My eyes widened after reading a few more lines. Guess whose paper he copycatted? Mine. Oh, he is not getting away with this one. Revenge. I alert HR and ask them if I can personally interview this guy and have them present. We met with the copycat last Monday. We give him an interview double-checking information. Then we give him a mock project as an exam. He smiles with a heh in his voice, saying he can have this ready in days. We tell him since there's a pending holiday, so to take his time. Mr. Copycat shows up today with a smug look like victory. Mr. Copycat shows us his projected plans and how he'd go about the problem. Also copied plagiarized. I knew it was going to happen because I picked the test most likely to be copied. I informed him that for the third interview, we'd be referencing his example work. Another nervous heh in his voice, so we started grilling him with industry-related questions, how he wrote questions, what he meant questions, and a few more about his works. Finally, I get to his research paper and lay on the grilling pressing harder. His replies are mostly errors, and a lot of answers that didn't make sense. Meanwhile, we'd re-ask how many years he had in the industry multiple times. All the while, he'd look back at his example work printed out and try to play off his own works. Finally, he gets some nerve to ask if this grilling was normal for our company. I tell him yes, and with an evil smirk I ask, "Me, one last question. So I ran your papers through Google." Copycat freezes up. It seems your papers seem to be copied by a whole bunch of other people. Me. You know those academic help sites out there referring to some cheat sites out there? Some of your papers were on there too. Copycat wide-eyed. Me, you might want to look into that. But before you go today, let me just say I never want to catch you trying to pass my paper as your own. That's right, your research paper is mine. You copied it. Copycat asked to go to the bathroom before continuing. We excuse him. He never came back into the interview room. He blocked our phone calls or want pickup. I just now contacted Google to take down his portfolio page, and I've let the guys at both the school and LinkedIn know too. If that'll have any help. Asterisk rolls eyes asterisk. The moral of the story is not to lie in an interview about anything.